incredulous watching the scenes play out at Kabul's airport, with the world watching. Thousands of desperate Afghanis clinging to American planes, trying to get themselves to safety. Tonight, this moment being described by some officials as worse than Saigon. Video shows a child being pulled aboard just before a packed plane took off. This comes 24 hours after America's worst fears are realized. The Taliban now in control of Kabul and all of Afghanistan, and much faster than few thought was possible. The president addressing the nation late this afternoon.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces.
Tonight, the humanitarian crisis is growing. The U.S. ready to evacuate Americans. But what about the thousands of Afghanis who helped us the past 20 years? How did this happen so quickly? And what comes next? We're on the ground in Kabul tonight. And halfway around the world, a different type of humanitarian disaster unfolding before our eyes. After a massive earthquake in Haiti this weekend, tonight, the search for survivors and the dire need for help. One first responder on the ground calling it pure chaos. And now another tropical threat is on the way. Our Matt Gutman is in Haiti tonight.
They're distributing food behind me. You can see how intense it's getting. It gives you a sense of how hungry people are.
Here in this country, the tropical storm system slamming Florida tonight, and the new threat that could be coming later this week. Rob Marciano is tracking it all for us. The alarming Delta variant surge, especially among younger Americans. Hospitalizations among people 49 and under up nearly 930% in just the past 2 months, and the mask battle as schools start to get underway. Tonight, electric car maker Tesla's autopilot system is under investigation, why safety regulators are concerned about the cars hitting emergency vehicles. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. While some have described it as a new day dawning in Afghanistan, others have said the same Afghanistan from 20 years ago is about to reemerge with an emboldened and stronger Taliban that has greater access to weapons and technology that we supplied. There is fear, confusion, and anger as the sun rises on Tuesday morning in Kabul. And now so many questions about how the Taliban was able to take over the entire country this quickly. Stunning scenes at Kabul's airport today. Residents so desperate to leave, they are risking it all, including their lives in some cases, running after a U.S. military plane pleading for a way out. Tonight, our team on the ground confirms the Taliban now controls the one road to the airport, and they are allowing foreign nationals, but not Afghanis, to leave. And the thousands who are trying to escape in many cases are the people who helped Americans while we were there for the past 2 decades. One of them telling ABC News tonight, "If I stay here, they will slaughter me." President Biden addressing the nation this afternoon, calling the scenes gut-wrenching, but said that he stands squarely behind his decision to pull out U.S. troops from the country. Our Ian Pannell leads us off tonight, bravely reporting in from the ground in Kabul.
Panic, chaos, and fear. The hallmarks of the Taliban's conquest of Kabul, Afghanistan's capital and what was the last government stronghold. America's emergency evacuation triggering panic as desperate civilians rush to the airport in fear for their lives. It's an image that'll stand as a tragic testimony to America's hasty departure. Crowds mobbing the tarmac, so desperate, some clinging for life or death to the departing planes. The pilots put in an unthinkable position. U.S. officials saying at least 3 people were run over and killed by the tires. Local reports saying people could be seen falling from the plane as it departed. The U.S. military temporarily suspending air operations to clear civilians flooding into the U.S. military-controlled zone, killing at least 2 armed men in the process. After nearly 20 years of conflict, the speed at which the US-backed forces collapsed has been breathtaking. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, one of the first to flee the country he vowed to protect, claiming in a Facebook post he wanted to save Kabul from bloodshed. Just hours later, this footage from Al Jazeera showing Taliban fighters inside his presidential palace declaring the restoration of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. All this marking the stunning climax of the militants' dramatic takeover. Taliban forces now in charge of the capital and most of the country, effectively ending the nation's experiment with liberal democracy.
Thanks to our military and our allies and the brave fighters of Afghanistan, the Taliban regime is coming to an end.
Former President Bush's words ring hollow as billowing smoke rises from the US Embassy, sensitive documents destroyed, helicopters ferrying staff from the country, an eerie echo of the fall of Saigon.
This is manifestly not Saigon. The fact of the matter is this. We went to Afghanistan 20 years ago with one mission in mind, and that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And that mission has been successful.
The Biden administration defending the US withdrawal from the country, but clearly caught totally off guard by the Taliban's rapid advance. The US sending 6,000 troops to hasten the emergency evacuation of embassy staff and thousands of Afghans who worked for the US mission. Today, armed checkpoints dot the city. The Taliban reportedly stopping locals from reaching the airport now, only allowing the foreigners to pass. Just 5 weeks ago, President Biden proclaiming he wouldn't let this war reach a fifth president, adamant this wouldn't happen.
The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
But the worst predictions for Afghanistan's future coming true, faster than anyone imagined. In less than 3 months, the Taliban capturing nearly every major district outside Kabul. And on the streets of the capital, fear and despair. Long lines this weekend as residents scramble to withdraw their life savings from banks with dwindling funds. And a desperate crush at the Pakistan border crossing as more people try to flee. But for those left behind, the women and girls in particular, their once bright futures now seem bleak. In the last 20 years, there have been some major gains for women. Female enrollment in secondary schools grew from just 6% in 2003 to 39% in 2017. And women's life expectancy grew from just 56 years in 2001 to 66 in 2017. All of that progress now at risk.
I have never felt it to this extent, helpless, hopeless, disappointed, poor and miserable in my life. All our 20 years achievement maybe just go in blinks of few days.
Reports already flooding in of retaliation against women. This displaced school teacher says she watched girls being lashed by the Taliban just for wearing sandals. Yet Miriam here, still defiant.
I'm not afraid of them. We are not the people who will, go back to the dark era. I'm a girl and I don't care about anyone. But what should I be scared of? This is my homeland, my land.
But her land, this country, now under Taliban rule.
This is our first time out onto the streets of Kabul since the Taliban came in and came to power. There are people out, there is traffic, there are pedestrians. But noticeably, we've been driving for 5 minutes now and I haven't seen one woman out on the streets. We've just come to an empty shopping mall and what looks like an empty restaurant, but we've been told there's a Taliban commander here. He's ready to meet us and face some questions about what's happened. What is your message to the people of Afghanistan, to the women and girls who are worried, but also to the Americans who are now leaving?
My message to them is that they should not be frightened of us. We are the sons of the same sword, brothers. My message to foreigners is they can see our history. They will not be able to beat us. This land will be standing free.
Tonight, the streets eerily silent. A quiet desperation has taken hold as Afghans wait in fear to see what future awaits them. After 20 years of war, costing trillions of dollars and tens of thousands of lives, many are questioning tonight, what was this all for?
Such harrowing scenes and realities there on the ground. Ian Pannell joins us now. Ian, what's the security situation like right now with the Taliban in control? Are there any concerns that the situation near the airport could turn violent with those checkpoints so close?
Yeah, Lindsay, I mean, this is really a tale of two cities, if you like. I mean, here in the main part of Kabul, where we're based, the Taliban are in control. We went out today, as you saw in my report, we saw Taliban manning checkpoints, heavily armed fighters driving around the town in pickup trucks, in Humvees. One of the most striking things that we didn't see was any women out on the streets. Now, one of my colleagues also went out. He said he did see a few odd women, many of them wearing the burqa, but I was struck, having been to the country many times, lived here for 2 years, seeing not a single woman out on the street. But it is calm. The Taliban have actually come here to our hotel. They've asked the security guards to leave. They say there's no need for them to be there anymore. They have now taken over control, not just of here, but of everywhere else. The other city is the chaos, the panic, the desperation that you're seeing down at the airport. Now, there's obviously a concerted attempt to try and resolve this situation. That's why the airport was closed for so long, because there were so many people on the tarmac. There was a lot of debris there. We think they've now managed to clear the people away, try and contain the situation. They've cleared away the debris, and I can already hear the sound of aircraft back up into the skies. But here's the problem. There's only one route into the airport, and at the moment there's a Taliban checkpoint there, and we're hearing they're only letting foreigners through. And when President Biden talks about the thousands of special immigrant visa applicants, these are people who risk their lives to help our mission here in Afghanistan, many of them afraid now to leave their houses because, of course, it's the Taliban that they're running away from, and even if they do, there's now a question about whether or not they can get back to the airport. We should not see the same chaotic scenes. This is going to be a true test when day breaks tomorrow, whether or not the situation's back under control.
Ian, we're running out of time, but I just want to ask you simply, do you feel safe?
Yes, I do. I mean, this is a weird thing. The Taliban came in, we had this bizarre moment where they wanted to take selfies, and they're joking and they're laughing and saying, please don't worry, foreigners are welcome, we want relations with the neighboring countries. The thing about the Taliban is they have a very, very different worldview. They see the world differently to us. A lot of them are very sort of simple, have a country, traditional Islamist view, and therefore, so they feel that they can provide security, that we don't need to worry. And the truth is, I think many Afghans will feel much safer. The turmoil that we've seen over the last 20 years, much of that will now be settled, but unfortunately the oppression that we saw before will return. Lindsay?
Ian, panel, stay safe out there. Our thanks to you. And despite the growing bewilderment from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle about how this is all played out, President Biden was defiant on his decision to leave. In an address, he admitted the situation on the ground spiraled faster than anyone thought it would happen. ABC's Stephanie Ramos is at the White House.
Tonight, with the world stunned by the images in Kabul and how swiftly Afghanistan has fallen to the Taliban, President Biden pointing fingers at his predecessor, former President Trump, who had already negotiated a deal with the Taliban, reducing the number of American troops from 15,000 to 2,500 by May 1st.
There was only the cold reality of either following through on the agreement to withdraw our forces or escalating the conflict and sending thousands more American troops back into combat in Afghanistan, lurching into the third decade of conflict.
Biden said he was unwilling to do that.
How many more lives, American lives, is it worth? How many endless rows of headstones at Arlington National Cemetery? I'm clear on my answer. I will not repeat the mistakes we've made in the past.
Biden is the fourth president after 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats to deal with the American toll of the war in Afghanistan.
I know my decision will be criticized, but I would rather take all that criticism than pass this decision on to another president of the United States, yet another one, a 5th one.
The cost, Biden says, is too high.
We spent over $1 trillion. We trained and equipped an Afghan military force with some 300,000 strong. And here's what I believe to my core. It is wrong to order American troops to step up when Afghanistan's own armed forces would not.
He spoke of the men and women in uniform who served in Afghanistan and the families who have lost loved ones there.
For those who have lost loved ones in Afghanistan, and for Americans who have fought and served in the country, serve our country in Afghanistan. This is deeply, deeply personal. It is for me as well.
Stephanie Ramos joins us now from the White House. Stephanie, the White House trying to play damage control here, but lawmakers on both sides of the aisle at this point are really starting to question why the U.S. was not better prepared.
Exactly, Lindsay, especially Republicans. We heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell today. He said he has argued with previous presidents before about troop withdrawal, but he had this to say about Biden's decision. I think the president felt strongly about this. Obviously, he overruled his own military leaders to do it, and he owns it. Lindsay.
Stephanie Ramos, thank you. And President Biden will sit down with George Stephanopoulos this Wednesday for an exclusive interview that we will bring you starting Wednesday night. Joining us now is Congressman Michael Waltz, Republican from Florida, a combat decorated veteran who served in Afghanistan with the Special Forces. He was also an advisor to former Defense Secretaries Donald Rumsfeld and Robert Gates, as well as former Vice President Dick Cheney. We thank you so much for joining us tonight, Congressman.
Sure, thank you.
After 2 decades of war, Afghanistan seems to really be right back where we found it under Taliban rule. As a lawmaker and a veteran, would you say that this war has been a failure?
No, it hasn't. And I want to be very clear to the veterans, the Gold Star families, the victims of 9/11, and so many others that have sacrificed so much. America was kept safe for 20 years. We didn't have another 9/11. We don't have, we had an entire generation grow up with that was not worried about planes flying into buildings or suicide bombers on buses. That said, it is incredibly difficult, disheartening, and even infuriating to see all of that progress really go up in smoke just in the matter of months. And in fact, now we're in a worse place than we were in 2001 because now we have no allies on the ground. Those who stood with us are being hunted down. The Taliban and al-Qaeda are still very much married at the hip. And we will face al-Qaeda 3.0, sadly, just as we head into the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
And so you say that we're now going to be facing al-Qaeda 3.0, and you said that the last 20 years we've been safe and not had to worry about the planes going into buildings. What about now? How concerned ought we be right now?
Every American should be very concerned. America is less safe as a result of this reckless withdrawal. Look, and it's not just me. This is Biden's own intelligence community that has repeatedly briefed us that this would be the case, that al-Qaeda fully intends to attack the United States again if given the chance. And what's so frustrating and infuriating is the same group of people that are around Biden or around Obama. When he pulled out of Iraq too soon, it led to the rise of ISIS, a caliphate the size of Indiana, attacks across Europe and the United States, and hundreds of thousands of dead around the world. So I just don't know how we haven't learned our lessons here. There were choices. They weren't great choices, but they were all certainly better than what we're seeing right now.
What would have been a better choice?
Well, a small presence that is focused on counterterrorism and continuing to support the Afghan military that provides air support, logistics, intelligence, much like we've had in Colombia for the last 40 years, much like we've had in the Philippines for decades. We've had 30,000 troops in South Korea for 70 years. Back in the 60s and 70s, when we were only 20 years in, the South Koreans would have struggled to stand on their own, too. So this is really about American leadership and bolstering our allies. I have to tell you, I can't imagine what our allies in, say, places like Taiwan or the Ukraine are feeling right now watching this and watching how this administration has abandoned Afghanistan, abandoned our local allies, and just thrown their hands up and walked away.
We've all been watching those horrific scenes from Kabul, throngs of people rushing at the airplanes and streets of the capital patrolled by Taliban fighters. What goes through your mind when you see these images?
Well, frankly, I go back and forth between rage and grief. It just breaks my heart. I lost one of my interpreters. He was captured at a Taliban checkpoint with American documentation on him. they didn't just execute him. They took him back to his village and beheaded him along with his brothers and cousins. This is the type of brutality that we're facing. It breaks my heart as a father for Afghan girls and women who had hope and a better future. That is all now squashed. So this is a disaster from a humanitarian standpoint. It's a disaster for American credibility around the world. And I have yet to see a plan, except for a slogan, over the horizon counterterrorism. I have yet to see an actual plan. We have 0 bases in the region. Not a single country surrounding Afghanistan has agreed to house our forces to be able to go after al-Qaeda. That's what I mean when we're in even a worse position than we were in 2001.
As I'm sure you heard President Biden today standing firm, saying he does not regret his decision to withdraw from Afghanistan and that he was essentially just playing the hand that he was dealt from former President Trump. Do you buy that?
Well, I want to be clear. Across multiple administrations, I opposed a full withdrawal, and I told President Trump's team that I thought this was a bad deal. The Taliban were not serious about peace or negotiations. But I also think it's incredibly disingenuous of President Biden, who has had no problem tearing up Trump deals he disagreed with, whether it's the Keystone Pipeline, Nord Stream 2, Iran, the border. We can go down the list to say suddenly he was just stuck with this one and had no choices. And further, it seems with his justification and reasoning that he would have done a full withdrawal anyway. So it really doesn't make sense on the face of it. And frankly, I think it's a feckless and weak excuse to blame a predecessor when you've had no problem walking away from your predecessor's other deals.
Several politicians, including Congresswoman Liz Cheney, have described this outcome as predictable. I imagine that you would agree. If the writing was on the wall for so many, what did the Biden administration miss?
Well, I think they missed how critical the narrative was that America is abandoning you, that you're on your own. No more air support, no more logistics and intelligence. Kind of that life raft for a struggling swimmer was yanked away from them very suddenly. And I think what they missed was, our allies around the world that I listed, the Philippines, Colombia, South Korea, I can keep going, are bolstered by knowing that America is with you, that America stands with you. And once that was pulled away, the Taliban used that psychological operation very effectively to say, you have 2 choices, Afghan army commander, face beheading and the death of your entire family, or surrender and we'll let you live. That psychology is hard to explain, but the Afghans could care less whether it's 200 soldiers or 20,000 soldiers. That notion of America standing with you is incredibly powerful. And the other thing we missed is Pakistan. And Pakistan is actively aiding and abetting this Taliban offensive. I'm calling for sanctions and a freezing of aid in moving forward. And what I want to hear from the administration is what next, and how are we going to keep America safe?
And you talked about what's next. I do want to kind of go there at this point. You've looked at Afghanistan from a number of different perspectives, as a soldier, as a policy advisor, and a lawmaker. So what are your biggest concerns about the risks going forward for our country? Is there any aspect of this that keeps you up at night?
Well, I think just as we saw, ISIS come roaring in the wake of our withdrawal from Iraq, you're going to see al-Qaeda 3.0 come roaring in the wake of our withdrawal from Afghanistan. So I do expect them to plot and plan attacks on the United States. I think we're blind now because our intelligence community left with the military. So we're blind in terms of what's going on. We have no bases in the region, and we have no local allies that would trust us. They're all being hunted down as we speak. So from a counterterrorism standpoint, I'm very concerned. From a great power competition with China, Russia, and Iran, Afghanistan was the only base in the world where we have where we had an air base sandwiched between all 3, and we just gave it up. And finally, there's still an American held hostage there. Mark Fearix, a Navy veteran, and his family is absolutely despondent, and that's understandable. We left him behind, too.
Are there negotiations ongoing to try to get him home safely?
We've lost, my understanding is there's some, but we have lost all leverage. The thing the Taliban wanted the most was America to lead. And one would have thought we could have at least gotten an American hostage back for that.
Congressman Waltz, we thank you so much for your time and, of course, appreciate your service to our country.
Okay, thank you.
And as we just discussed there tonight, we are thinking about the ones left behind in the chaos after America's hasty departure from Afghanistan, the thousands of Afghans who helped the U.S. during our 20-year war. Some were lucky and got out, others now fighting to escape with their lives hanging in the balance. Here's ABC's Chief Global Affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz.
Tonight, as thousands of Afghans tried desperately to leave the country, this Afghan mechanic who worked with American forces in Afghanistan watches anxiously from his new home here in the States, thankful he was able to get out just in time.
This week I came here, and then next Friday it was under the Taliban control.
But now he worries about loved ones back home who have no way out.
God should save them, and they should save themselves, they should hide themselves. Will they start searching for them or putting them in prison or killing them? We don't know.
We met an Afghan interpreter for U.S. troops, fearful for his life even before the Taliban swept into Kabul.
I know that I will be killed by the Taliban. I will continue this fight.
Abdul now in hiding, his fears greater than ever. We also met Camilla Siddiqui in Kabul, who built her own business there. At the time, she said she wanted to stay there to fight for women's rights.
I came here because this is the time to be here in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan needs us.
But tonight, with the Taliban in full control, we learned Camilla was able to escape, something so many others are still trying to do. Afghan allies stuck in the capital city left in a state of limbo. This man recording a glimpse into the deteriorating situation.
All the streets are empty. The people are trying to keep themselves hide. All the people are trying to get out of the country. See, there's no people in the bazaar and the town.
At the post office, an entirely different scene.
A lot of people try to get their passports. The post office say the situation is not good. I hope I can get my wife's passport.
Zach is one of many who worked with the U.S. military during the war and is now trying to flee to safety. Major Thomas Schumann worked with him on the ground in Afghanistan, and now he's working to get him out.
He wasn't just my translator, he was my brother. He was basically one of my Marines.
If he does not make it to the airport, he is known to be, in the Taliban's terms, an infidel, is what they call him, because he's worked with the Americans.
That same day, the situation growing more tense, more precarious in Kabul.
I tried to come to passport office, and the Taliban just entered to Kabul.
While the Taliban was reaching the capital city, Zach was still trying to get a passport for himself and his family.
A lot of crowd, and unfortunately, I didn't get my wife's passport.
What the Taliban does to people who work with U.S. forces, they execute them. This is not a what if kind of scenario. I think this is what will happen if we cannot get Zach to the airport.
Everything is stopped.
Major Schumann advised Zach to make his way to the airport anyway, but soon the men fell out of contact.
How much time is left? I think the time has expired. There is no time left.
We learned that Zach did reach the airport that night with his family, but was unable to get on a flight. They had to turn back home. Zach sent an update after returning from the airport.
But we just returned back to our apartment because there was a gunshot fire everywhere.
His future, like so many of those stuck in a Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, is uncertain tonight.
Do I feel like Zach's been betrayed? I think it's a very simple transaction. You serve with U.S. forces, and we will provide you a visa. He served with U.S. forces. We did not provide the visa. I think that's a betrayal.
So many now using that word betrayal. Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, switching gears a bit, the U.S. was training the Afghan military to defend itself. In the end, it obviously was unable to do so. What kind of intelligence questions does this now raise?
A lot of them, Lindsay, not only intelligence questions, but really military training questions. We spent 20 years there, $83 billion training Afghan forces. I saw that up close, and I heard over the years military commanders very concerned in the beginning, largely illiterate troops. But later, they kept talking about how much better they'd gotten, how much more capable they were. President Biden, when he first announced the withdrawal, talked about the strong forces there, 300,000 strong. And yet, when it came to the Taliban moving in on them, many just laid down their rifles. So they really have to have some sort of reckoning, the U.S., the military, about what happened with those forces, what we didn't do right. And there also has to be a lot of questions, Lindsay, about the intelligence failure. We did not know that the Taliban could take over so quickly in that country, even though we've spent 20 years watching the Taliban.
20 years, and now just a matter of a little over a week, all of that seems to be gone. Martha Raddatz, our thanks to you. Joining us now is a former DOD contractor who spent 5 years in Afghanistan traveling the country there, Ryan Jackson. We thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I understand that you personally employed many Afghanis at various U.S. bases, and you know Afghanis right now who are still desperately trying to get out. What are you hearing from them at this moment, the people that you know who are still in Afghanistan?
I hear nothing but desperation and broken hearts right now. They're very upset, they're very scared, and they're not feeling that they get a lot of support at this current time.
What do you say back to them?
I don't really have a lot to say. I'm trying to exhaust any avenue I can to try to assist, but the process has got a lot of red tape around it. It's not as easy as you think it would be, as simply as proving somebody engaged in service with the U.S. forces. It's just not simple to get them out, even though it seems that way if you see it on the media.
The Afghan interpreter plight and the Afghanis employed by the U.S. in Afghanistan, that's not a new issue. Who is responsible for what many are describing as the abject failure to have a plan to get individuals out of the country who now may be literally in a life or death situation?
I would say ultimately the Biden administration. Right now, it's definitely their lane, and they're failing to provide clear-cut path to success to Department of State. I think they need to cut through a lot of the red tape and just evacuate these people. They should have seen this coming for years ago. This is not a surprise. And the way that, I keep seeing in the media saying everybody in Washington is shocked and just baffled about the events that are unfolding. If anybody didn't know exactly what is happening now was going to occur the way it is happening now, then they were woefully mistaken. I mean, anybody that has any sense or experience of being over there should have been able to forecast this happening just as it is today.
If you had President Biden's ear, what would you have said to him prior to this?
Don't withdraw to begin with. That's going to be a massive mistake that we're going to pay for many years to come. But if you have to withdraw, take your allies with you. Don't leave in the middle of the night from Bagram and then tell these people to send an email to the embassy in Kabul to try to get clearance to leave. The U.S. knows exactly who worked for them and who provided service. All the Afghan locals had to enter their biometric data into a U.S. database to prove who they were, wherever they were encountered on base or off base. So we know exactly who they are. They ought to be able to show up there at the airport, scan through the biometric system, and once it's proven that they're in there, they ought to be able to get on a plane and leave.
I'm curious, though, because your first part of your answer, you said don't withdraw. So for how many years? I mean, would you stay another 5 years, another 20?
No matter how long it takes. If we needed to be there another 50 years. When you go to another we go to another country and take apart their government, you're responsible to see it through to the end, no matter how long it takes. I can't believe that we abandoned them in the fashion that we did. they're going to be in pure civil war, I bet, within 30 days.
Were you surprised the Afghan army that the U.S. invested $84 billion plus training fell so quickly to the Taliban?
No.
Why not?
The Afghan army would have known to fight would be futile. They didn't have the support anymore from us in terms of airstrikes, logistical support, or material support. You know, we were the people backing them, and once we turned tail and left, I don't know any Afghan army person that would have had any kind of delusions that they could have stood up against the Taliban. They simply don't have the resources or the ability to conduct that kind of warfare themselves.
I suppose that it's safe to assume that all the weapons, equipment, and technology that the U.S. helped arm the Afghan army with over the past 2 decades are now in the hands of the Taliban?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, the Taliban are stronger now than they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they didn't have all of our advanced weapons and armored vehicles and munitions and everything that they have right now today.
Lastly, do you have a message that you want to pass along to the people who you know in Afghanistan tonight who may never be able to get out, who are now facing a dramatically different life under Taliban rule in the only country they've ever known?
I would say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you trusted us and we let you down. I would say don't hold it against all Americans, because this administration has called the shots and put this strategy into play. Don't hold it against America as a whole. We stand with you. There's only so much we can do when the Department of State won't get them out of there. You know, we need to do the right thing. And I would just say I'm sorry for how we've left you.
Former DoD contractor Ryan Jackson, we thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
When we come back, we are closely tracking 3 tropical threats at this hour. Fred just made landfall in the Florida Panhandle, and another storm impacting earthquake-ravaged Haiti. And speaking of Haiti, our team on the ground there, the devastation and misery can be difficult for some to wrap their minds around as search and rescue teams continue to look for survivors. Stay with us.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live. It's all about you.
Assault on the Capitol, the ABC News original, exclusively on Hulu, now streaming. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the 2nd straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back. A tropical system is now lashing Haiti. On any normal day, a tropical system battering that island brings the risks of deadly mudslides. That's still the case, but the threat is further compounded by this. Take a look at this drone footage. There are thousands in that nation now homeless, many sleeping in the streets after that powerful 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck. Our Matt Gutman and team traveled to Haiti soon after we first got word. He tells us the needs near the epicenter are staggering.
In Haiti tonight, dimming hope in those mounds of pulverized concrete and increasingly scenes of anguish. Hotels and churches crumbled. So many are dead here that caskets are being driven out on mopeds.
The earthquake tore this voodoo temple right off the mountain. Now, these firefighters have been working here for 2 days now. They believe there are more bodies in the rubble, and this goes on for house after house.
One of the houses here belonged to Lucia Seville. We arrived as those gravediggers were finishing their work, and under the upturned earth, her daughter. She tells us 2 of her daughters were killed, her son badly injured. One of her surviving daughters inconsolable. She took us to her house, clutching her daughter's arm. We scrambled down the hill, and she showed me how she pulled family members to safety. They say they received no help, partly because there is so little help here. This paramedic helping the U.S. Coast Guard evacuate as many as they could fit on those choppers.
It's chaos right now. There is no coordination of resources,
including the chaotic distribution of food and water. Fearful of more aftershocks, many are sleeping in tents on the soccer field.
You can see this church destroyed by that earthquake, and just minutes ago, they dug 2 people from the rubble here.
And with that tropical depression sweeping in, we asked Lucia and her neighbors if they'll have to sleep outdoors tonight. All of them saying yes.
So much concern now about the people who don't have a place to stay, and Grace is arriving there now. Matt, what kind of aid have you seen on the ground so far near the epicenter and into the countryside?
To put it bluntly, Lindsay, not enough aid. So the U.S. Coast Guard is flying missions here to medevac the injured. We've seen 1 firefighting crew, fire rescue crew, since we've been here. There are a few aid groups that are trickling in, but a lot of them are just getting their bearings now. And we're, 50 hours after the earthquake itself. There have been aftershocks, and, we're hearing that there's not a lot of running water in many of these communities, especially up in the mountains. And, communities are about half an hour from the coast, but about 4 hours from the capital of Port-au-Prince. So they rely on cisterns for water. They don't have enough water to drink. So we're not talking about building their houses or even tarps to cover them ahead of this tropical depression. We're talking about water to drink, food, basic necessities. They're not able to get to medical care. So there is a tremendous amount of need here in Haiti. In fact, we saw 1 food distribution truck, and people just were clamoring for anything they can get. We don't know what is holding it up. The government says it's trying to help, but one of the major hindrances have been the roads. Not only have they been inundated by massive blocks of earth, but they are also prowled in many cases by gangs that haven't let aid through. Lindsay.
And now Grace just adding insult to injury, really. Matt Gutman, our thanks to you on the ground. Joining us now is Haiti's ambassador to the United States, Mr. Bochid Edmond. Mr. Edmond, first, just want to start off by expressing our deepest condolences to you and your entire nation. Thank you so much for joining us. At this moment, what is the greatest need on the ground there, particularly with this tropical system near those hard-hit communities?
Thank you so much for having me. At this moment, I believe the most important thing is the search and rescue, because we think that probably there might have been some people trapped down still. We hope for a miracle, but otherwise we need to make sure that we discover all those bodies, if in case, and to make sure that they have a proper burial and so on. But at the same time, we are bracing for grace. That should be arriving this afternoon. I believe we do hope there won't be any heavy rain. Otherwise, that will temper all those efforts that are being done to recover the bodies and with the search that we are doing actually.
And is Haiti still experiencing at this moment aftershocks? We're hearing that some people are afraid to sleep indoors because of them. How are you managing that on top of the weather in the area?
Yeah, the issue is the aftershock. That's always been the case. But I believe since yesterday, we haven't heard any aftershock, any news from for aftershock. But I believe the most important thing that we are concentrating in is to make sure that the relief efforts, be worked for, particularly for those victims. And I believe there are many of them, more than 14,000 families, who doesn't have any roof over their head. Therefore, we need to make sure that they put them somewhere and public facilities, and to make sure that until we have means to give them, they can be protected, and to bring them some medical attention, those who were wounded, and to make sure that we have enough medical supplies, and so we can bring the service and the help needed to them.
I'm just trying to picture this, because with many people sleeping in tents and outdoors, do you have enough shelter? Do you have enough spaces and places for people to go and retreat once grace is there?
We are working very hard. I mean, so far the assistance we have received, I believe, with them, I cannot say that they are enough, but so far we are getting some help, particularly from the USAID team and other countries that send some assistance. We are doing our best to see if we don't have enough tents to put all of them, but that's why we are trying to use the public facilities where we can move them, so they will be protected if the winds comes, and to make sure that they are not being left outside.
And of course, this comes just weeks after the assassination of President Moise. This earthquake is, of course, throwing the prospects of a new election into chaos. Are you concerned about a power vacuum caused by all of this instability, leading to violence and even more unrest, possibly?
Yeah, I don't think there is a power vacuum. I believe that probably one will tell you that there is no current acting president, but the prime minister and his government, they are assuming the executive power. Therefore, there is no power vacuum whatsoever. But what we are doing our best not only to address the challenges caused by the earthquake, but at the same time, we are doing our best to address all those other issues like insecurity, and to make sure that very soon we prepare ourselves as a country, as a democratic country, to have elections.
And what's being done to ensure that some of the gang violence in the Haitian capital during the past few weeks does not impede the desperate humanitarian efforts as aid groups try to reach these hard-hit communities?
I believe the national police is working very hard, particularly in certain areas that were not being able to access, and the national police entered them, and now they are under control of the national police. And we are making sure that all those humanitarian corridors that have been created to give access to those who are trying to access hospitals and so on be respected. And I think we are doing our best to make sure that all those, the public orders particularly, remain in place in certain places, and to make sure that the people who need access to hospital, to other places, they have access to it. But the national police is doing its job now.
There has been just so much devastation in Haiti this year, but the challenges have been generations in the making. According to the UN, about 59% of the people living in Haiti are under the poverty line, and 24% of people live in extreme poverty. How can the people of Haiti recover from all of this?
Sometimes it may look very difficult, but I don't think it's impossible, because we have done great things in our past. We still can do it, but it's a matter of getting together to do that. I understand it's very important to give the people hope, because in this time of challenges, it's very important we build that trust within the people and give the people of Haiti hope that things can be better tomorrow. But all the elites, all the political stakeholders, political leaders, we need to work together as Haitians first, because even though we believe in the international assistance, we welcome that, but at the same time, the first help should come inside. That's why we appreciate the fact that Haitians, between themselves now, they are organizing and to bring assistance and help to our brothers and sisters. Even though we welcome the international assistance, but the Haitian efforts is also very important, and this is what is happening now.
And you say that you welcome the international assistance. How can the United States and the rest of the international community help you at this time? Have you asked the Biden administration for any assistance?
Of course, we did. We did ask, and the response was very swift. And we get the answer, particularly from the U.S. Administrator, Samantha Powers, who was designated by President Biden to be the coordinator of this humanitarian assistance. So far, the USAID team is already in Haiti, and the U.S. Coast Guard is helping, particularly transporting those wounded to bigger hospital. And I think the help of the United States has been consistent, and we appreciate that.
Mr. Boshid Edmond, we thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you talking with us tonight.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Still ahead here on Prime, 5 states across the South with ICUs at more than 90% as cases, particularly those among young children, continue to rise. Why Tesla is now under federal investigation and why we have a growing shortage of bus drivers across the country. But first, our tweet of the day, American soccer titan Carly Lloyd saying goodbye to the game. She has been a joy for so many to watch over the years.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show, ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the 2nd straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
There was never a good time to withdraw from Afghanistan. That from President Biden this afternoon as he addressed the nation for the first time since the Taliban takeover. Biden saying that the U.S. withdrew, accomplishing its goals.
After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces.
And today, the world seeing chaos at the Kabul airport. Afghans fearing the harsh hand of the Taliban, desperate to leave the country, storming the airport, clinging onto departing planes, and falling off to their deaths.
It certainly felt like a hurricane coming ashore just a few hours ago. Still a formidable storm to our north and east, where damaging winds and tornadoes are a possibility over the next couple of hours. And the tropical rains, all of it, will be drifting north. And those flood watches have been extended past Georgia, now into North Carolina. And this rain will get all the way up into the northeast. Grace, just south of Haiti now. The next 12 hours will be difficult with flooding rains, potentially mudslides getting into the Gulf of Mexico, and then heading into Mexico this weekend.
The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has opened a formal investigation into Tesla's autopilot system. It's identified 11 crashes since 2018 in which Teslas hit parked emergency vehicles with their flashing lights on. The autopilot also is frequently misused by drivers. They'll be looking into that, too.
A violent weekend in New York City. At least 35 people shot between Friday and early this morning. That includes 16 shootings in a span of just 90 minutes. Out of all the crime scenes, the biggest was at a party in Bed-Stuy where 8 people were shot.
Officers escorting paramedics through the chaos as they rush gunshot victims awaiting ambulances. Around 12:30 in the morning, a crowd of about 100 to 150 people were outside listening to music when someone opened fire.
Guns is on the streets constantly. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you. It's just crazy out here, that's it.
Police say that none of last night's 16 gunshot victims are expected to die, but certainly their lives have now been changed forever.
And some kids aren't able to go back to school for a lack of bus drivers.
We've had almost 18 months of a break here.
that a lot of these districts who ended up not keeping their bus drivers on the payroll, they found other jobs elsewhere.
The Savannah, Georgia public school system is more than 100 drivers short, leaving about 5,000 students stranded. The school year in Pittsburgh's also been delayed 2 weeks because of a driver shortage.
And it almost is a perfect storm of everything that is going on. The pay, COVID. I mean, you're in an enclosed bus.
We dealt with good years, bad years, but I've never seen any of those years as bad as this one.
But hiring more drivers isn't as easy as it sounds.
You're talking maybe 6 to 8 weeks to just get boarded, and in some cases, another 8 to 12 weeks to be trained and certified.
It's the latest TikTok sensation, hashtag Bama Rush Talk. You're not alone if your feed is being taken over by videos from the University of Alabama's sorority recruitment. Scrolling through, leaving many bending over backwards to try to understand everything from the accents to the thousands of outfits or hair videos of both current sororities and Pledge's post, providing a glimpse into what's behind the shiny surface with girls sharing both their negative and positive experiences.
Welcome back, everyone. Tonight here at home, the Delta variant continues to surge out of control. Hospital admissions for people under the age of 49 now at the highest number of any point in the pandemic. And concern is growing among doctors tonight about the growing number of pediatric COVID cases, 121,000 just in the past week. Doctors say, though, severe illness among children is uncommon. We'll have more on that crisis in our next hour. Before we go tonight, the image of the day, this shopkeeper covering up this advertisement showing a woman's face in front of a beauty salon in Afghanistan. It cannot be overstated just how tenuous the situation is that is playing out in that nation for women, their freedoms and their ability to live without fear. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up in the next hour, we're staying on top of several things, including the latest in Afghanistan. What will happen to the men and women who helped America for so many years? And we're also following that other major international headline across another crisis in Haiti. If not dealing with a powerful earthquake is bad enough, now citizens there are dealing with a tropical system dumping heavy rains and now creating a possibility of mudslides. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Fog. I've never seen it so thick in my life.
We're still too low level for flight following at this time.
No matter what happens, the storm eventually ends. And when the storm does end, you want to make sure that you're ready.
Kobe Bryant had the best story because he told it himself.
The Black Mamba was a killer.
No fear.
His legacy is this rocky journey ending up in such a great place and stopping.
Superstar Kobe Bryant.
Mambas don't die.
Wednesday on ABC.
This guy went to her condo and she opened the door and he shot her and she's dead? What?
No one at that age ever thinks they're in danger.
It was one of the most chillingly awful killings.
It's so unreal.
We were just horrified.
Rebecca Schaefer's case still haunts Hollywood, and it always will.
How did obsession lead to?
To hear that it was a fan, it was the worst thing I'd ever heard.
And the phone call you just have to hear. 2020, Friday at 9, 8 Central on ABC.
I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. New York lawmakers making a major reversal after facing backlash for suspending impeachment proceedings following the resignation of Governor Cuomo. Lawmakers now say they will issue a public report on their investigation. As you know, Governor Cuomo resigned amid allegations that he sexually harassed 11 women. He steps down effectively 11:59 p.m. August 23rd. COVID infections continue to surge from coast to coast, but this number struck us. Hospitalizations among people 49 and under have jumped nearly 930% in just the past 2 months, as pediatric hospitalizations are as high as they've ever been. All this as one superintendent in Dallas is defying a state Supreme Court ruling that upheld a ban on mandating masks in schools. And Tropical Storm Fred slammed ashore a short time ago in the Florida Panhandle. That storm brought 65-mile-per-hour winds and is threatening flash floods and tornadoes as it makes its way through the southeast, then up the mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, another tropical system is impacting Haiti just days after a powerful earthquake there. More on that story in just a few moments. With all of these headlines, even another catastrophic quake in Haiti is taking a back seat to the shocking end of nearly 20 years of war in Afghanistan. The Taliban has taken over Kabul, the capital city, and we witnessed some desperate scenes at the airport there. President Biden today defended the decision despite its messy aftermath. ABC's Ian Pannell is there for us tonight.
Tonight, the panic, chaos and desperation at the Kabul airport, then forced to shut down. Thousands of Afghans crowding onto the runway, surrounding this massive C-17 military jet, some clinging to the side of the fuselage. Horrifying local reports saying people could be seen falling from the plane as it took off. The despair at the airport overwhelming. Throngs of people swarming up the walkway, trying to board one flight, forcing themselves inside another, the pilots unable to take off in the chaos. This disturbing video even showing a child being pulled aboard, hanging by that rope. This image obtained by Defense One showing hundreds of people packed inside one plane. Barbed wire separating the airport from the desperate masses stranded outside. Dozens climbing the walls onto the airfield. At least 7 people killed in the chaos. At one point, gunfire erupting on the tarmac. Officials confirming U.S. troops shot and killed at least 2 armed men as thousands streamed onto the runway and at least 1 U.S. military service member injured. U.S. troops forced to hold their ground at gunpoint. The Taliban announcing they're now in full control. 20 years of American and NATO-led gains collapsing in stunning fashion in just a matter of days. Armed checkpoints around the city, the Taliban now separating foreigners from locals. Militants seizing control of the main route to the airport, only allowing foreigners through. Just 5 weeks ago, the president was adamant that a complete Taliban takeover was unlikely.
The likelihood there's going to be the Taliban overrunning everything and owning the whole country is highly unlikely.
But under growing pressure to address the unfolding crisis, President Biden today saying he stands by his decision.
I stand squarely behind my decision. After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there was never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. The truth is, this did unfold more quickly than we had anticipated.
And on the images now seen around the world, Afghans holding on to that C-17, scaling the airport walls, the president acknowledged how difficult it is to watch.
I am President of the United States of America, and the buck stops with me. I'm deeply saddened by the facts we now face, but I do not regret my decision. American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
And this is the new reality tonight. Images from Al Jazeera seen around the world showing Taliban fighters inside the presidential palace, triumphantly declaring the restoration of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. The militants sweeping through major cities in a week. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, likely in an effort to save his own life, fleeing the country he vowed to protect, claiming in a Facebook post he wanted to save Kabul from bloodshed. Tonight, the president signing off on deploying at least 6,000 troops to the region, assisting the emergency evacuation of almost all US personnel, American citizens, and thousands of Afghans who supported the US-led mission. For a time, black smoke seen rising from the US embassy. Embassy staffers ordered to destroy sensitive equipment and documents, especially those containing images of the American flag that could be used as propaganda.
The Taliban are out in force. You see them at different checkpoints around the city. But we've been driving for 5 minutes, and what's really noticeable is we haven't seen one woman out on the streets.
But tonight, already chilling new reports of mounting human rights abuses against women and girls. Many concerned the freedoms gained over the last 20 years in education and the workplace now in jeopardy. We visited this school for girls in April.
My wish is to raise the women's voice. What really I want is to be a very well-known journalist. I will go for an interview in front of the boss, and if he asks me that, what is the main reason, what is the main wish did you hear, I would tell him that I want to sit in that chair that right now you're sitting. I really want that.
But tonight, in a country where women leaders have only just been welcomed, they now fear for their lives.
For sure, I'm afraid of myself, my life, and my freedom to work and my freedom to speak up. These are the things that I'm afraid of losing them.
So much fear at this time. Our thanks to Ian. And now we take a specific look at the Afghans left behind in the chaos after America's hasty departure. The thousands who helped the U.S. during our two-decade war. Some got out, others now fighting to escape a regime that could come after them. Here's ABC's Chief Global Affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz.
Tonight, as thousands of Afghans tried desperately to leave the country, this Afghan mechanic who worked with American forces in Afghanistan watches anxiously from his new home here in the States, thankful he was able to get out just in time.
This week, I came here, and then next Friday, it was under the Taliban control.
But now he worries about loved ones back home who have no way out.
God should save them, and they should save themselves, they should hide themselves. Will they start searching for them or putting them in prison or killing them? We don't know.
We met an Afghan interpreter for U.S. troops, fearful for his life even before the Taliban swept into Kabul.
I know that I will be killed by the Taliban. I will continue this fight.
Abdul now in hiding, his fears greater than ever. We also met Camilla Siddiqui in Kabul, who built her own business there. At the time, she said she wanted to stay there to fight for women's rights.
I came here because this is the time to be here in Afghanistan, and Afghanistan needs us.
But tonight, with the Taliban in full control, we learned Camilla was able to escape, something so many others are still trying to do.
For more on the crisis in Afghanistan, we bring in Craig Whitlock, an investigative reporter with The Washington Post and author of the forthcoming book, The Afghanistan Papers, A Secret History of the War. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We heard President Biden say that he stands squarely behind his decision to withdraw from Afghanistan. What do you make of President Biden's words today?
Well, I think he wants to keep doing what he's doing. He wants to get America out of this war. He wants to bring the military and diplomatic personnel and others home. Obviously, the Biden administration was not well prepared. It certainly didn't expect the Afghan army and police to collapse as suddenly as they did, and for the Taliban to take over the country so quickly. So even though Biden just a few weeks ago had promised this wouldn't be a Saigon moment like happened in Vietnam in 1975, that's certainly very similar to what's happening right now. But I think he recognizes there's no future for the military in Afghanistan. Now's the time to get out. There's no partner there anymore in the Afghan government. And so he's trying to explain his rationale to begin with to the American people who, polls show also want to get out.
Do you believe him when he says he doesn't regret his decision to end this war?
It's not for me. I'm a national security reporter, not a political reporter, so I'm not going to get inside the president's head. But I think it's clear from Biden's record that since he was vice president in the Obama administration, that he was very skeptical about what the United States could accomplish strategically in Afghanistan. So the fact that he's made clear since he moved into the White House that he wanted to get out. That's certainly not a surprise.
But Craig, for those who served, for those who lost their lives, at this point, what was that sacrifice for?
Well, the original objective of the war after 9/11 was to go into Afghanistan and prevent another attack on the United States by destroying or dismantling al-Qaeda. And really, we accomplished that within the first 6 months or so. So that goal, that original purpose of the war, was largely successful. The question is, what have we been doing there for the last 19 years? And we've certainly been trying to accomplish a lot of noble things, like build up the Afghan government, establish democracy there, bring civil rights and human rights, particularly to Afghan women and girls. So, those have been very noble goals, but those weren't why we originally went in. So I think it's certainly understandable now that a lot of veterans who served there are sort of asking themselves those very questions. What did we accomplish? What was the purpose? And, it's tough for them right now. The bottom line is what we tried to accomplish since particularly the last 10 years, since bin Laden was killed in Pakistan, it's hard to point to anything. We've spent a lot of money, tried to change a lot of things with Afghan society and their government. And, that all went by the wayside, went up in a big puff of smoke over the last week.
A big part of the mission over the past decade, of course, was training the Afghan military to get ready to defend itself. In the end, why couldn't they do it?
Well, as we report in documents we obtained for our book, The Afghanistan Papers, the U.S. military knew this was going to be a real struggle to train the Afghan military for a number of reasons. First, when we went in the 2000s under the Bush administration, we had to create an Afghan army and police force from scratch. And when we did that, we tried to model it on the U.S. military with this, big bureaucracy and logistical apparatus and, expensive weapons and, but that's what we knew how to do. So we expected the Afghans to do it. And, that was a real struggle. It was a poor fit. There are just a number of other challenges. The Afghans were really plagued by illiteracy for years. More than 90% of the recruits in the army and the police force were illiterate. So the Americans had to teach them how to read instruction manuals, had to teach them how to count in some cases. Many of them didn't even know their colors. So, that's tough to build a force of over 300,000 people in their military, given what we had to work with. Another big question was motivation. The Afghans, army and police are supposed to be fighting for their government, but the Afghan government really had less and less popular legitimacy as time went on. It was seen as deeply corrupt. And while many Afghans, really hated the Taliban for their brutality, in many cases they came to see them as the least worst option. They thought the Afghan government was worse. And I think that was a big reason why we saw such a wholesale surrender in the past week.
Has the Taliban changed at all, or is it the same as the one that harbored bin Laden more than 20 years ago?
That's a good question. I think they're certainly better in terms of public relations and social media and communications and things like that than they were in the 1990s. But I don't know that their ideology has changed very much, and I think we're seeing that as they move across the country. This is a very conservative, fundamentalist, Islamist organization. They have a very distinct view in that regard, and I don't think that's really changed. The question is, how are they going to try and govern their country? How are they going to try and interact with outside powers? And, that's an open question at this point. But, I don't think anybody's arguing that their ideology has changed.
You're set to release your new book, The Afghanistan Papers, next month. How much of it have you had to revise, or do you plan to revise after the events of the past few days? Were these shocking scenes predictable to you?
I don't know that the events of the last few days were predictable in the sense of just how quickly the end came for the Afghan government and their forces. But certainly, the signs were there, and we've documented them voluminously in the Afghanistan papers about just how weak and corrupt the Afghan government and its armed forces were. That this had been a problem that the Americans knew was going to be an enormous challenge for at least the last 10 years. And yet what happened was U.S. leaders in really 3 presidential administrations, from Bush to Obama to Trump, kept telling the American public and the world at large the complete opposite of reality. They kept saying, we're making progress, we're turning the corner, we're going to win. As recently as a few years ago, President Trump promised the American people when he sent more troops to Afghanistan that we were going to win the war. And yet all the documents we've obtained, all the oral history interviews showed that almost no one in the government believed this. Yet this was all for public consumption, that things were going well as an excuse to continue the war. So I think when people read the book, it's going to confirm a lot of their suspicions. And frankly, it's going to make them angry because they're going to see it in black and white. The fact that the leaders of the country and of the military and of the State Department knew there were fundamental flaws, fatal flaws with their strategy in Afghanistan for over a decade, yet they kept telling the public everything was good.
Craig Whitlock, author of the forthcoming book, The Afghanistan Papers, A Secret History of the War. We thank you so much. Thousands are now homeless after that powerful 7.2 quake rocked Haiti, and now there is a tropical system lashing the island. The storm is now hitting, but earlier in the day, our team witnessed some desperate scenes as families search for survivors, often with little government help. If it wasn't for the utter disastrous mess in Afghanistan, this story would be dominating headlines around the world. Our Matt Gutman is on the ground and files this report.
In Haiti tonight, dimming hope in those mounds of pulverized concrete and increasingly scenes of anguish. Hotels and churches crumbled. So many are dead here that caskets are being driven out on mopeds. The earthquake tore this voodoo temple right off the mountain. Now, these firefighters have been working here for 2 days now. They believe there are more bodies in the rubble, and this goes on for house after house. One of the houses here belonged to Lucia Seville. We arrived as those gravediggers were finishing their work, and under the upturned earth, her daughter. She tells us 2 of her daughters were killed, her son badly injured. One of her surviving daughters inconsolable. She took us to her house, clutching her daughter's arm. We scrambled down the hill, and she showed me how she pulled family members to safety. They say they received no help, partly because there is so little help here. This paramedic helping the U.S. Coast Guard evacuate as many as they could fit on those choppers.
It's chaos right now. There is no coordination of resources,
including the chaotic distribution of food and water. And with that tropical depression sweeping in, we asked Lucia and her neighbors if they'll have to sleep outdoors tonight. All of them saying yes.
Switching gears now, tonight we're also tracking Tropical Storm Fred, which has made landfall in Florida tonight, and the possibility of another storm later this week as well. Our Rob Marciano is in Florida, where Fred barreled through earlier today. Rob, we're rapidly approaching the peak of hurricane season, and it shows.
It certainly does, Lindsay, and this storm was nearly rapidly intensifying as it came ashore as a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It felt like a hurricane at times just a few hours ago. Now it's centered to our north and east, but still a formidable storm. In the next couple of hours will be dicey, and as far as damaging winds is concerned, across parts of the Florida Panhandle into Alabama and Georgia, where tornado watches are now posted. And then after that, all this tropical rain, all this moisture is going to be fed northward, and our flash flood watches have been extended from Georgia now in through the Carolinas, and a lot of this will get all the way in through Virginia and the Northeast eventually. Grace now just south of the Haiti coastline, and unfortunately the next 12 to 18 hours are going to be difficult there with some heavy rain and some flooding, potentially some mudslides, and tropical storm warnings out for Cuba. Then it gets through the Yucatan into the southern Gulf of Mexico, at which time will likely become a hurricane on Friday, and at this time we expect it to stay south of Texas and go into Mexico, but obviously we'll be monitoring that closely, as you mentioned, getting closer to the peak of hurricane season. Lindsay?
Rob, thank you. And now to COVID. As infections continue to surge across the country, pediatric hospitalizations are now as high as they've ever been, just as students return to school amid a fierce debate about mask mandates for those too young to be vaccinated. ABC's Marcus Moore is in Dallas tonight.
Tonight, COVID-19 continuing its rapid spread across the nation. The rate of hospital admissions for people under 49 now at its highest point in the pandemic. In Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas, ICUs are at over 90% capacity.
We have our nursing team and our physician teams getting stretched thinner and thinner to take care of all the COVID patients that are throughout the hospital and our ICUs right now.
And concern growing with the number of pediatric COVID cases at the highest point of the pandemic. 121,000 new cases reported in just the last week. This graph from the CDC showing the spike in new hospital admissions for children with COVID, an increase of more than 400% since the 4th of July. And as students return to school today, the debate over masks continues. One day after the Texas Supreme Court upheld Governor Abbott's executive ban on mask mandates in 2 counties, Dallas Independent School District Superintendent Michael Hinojosa defiant.
We're going to ask them to comply. We're going to give them a mask. We're going to give them a little bit of time. And if they don't, then we'll ask them to leave, and if they don't, we'll have a place for them. But it'll be separated from everybody else.
And Lindsay, today, Pfizer and BioNTech submitted early data to the FDA showing that a third dose of their vaccine appears to show antibody levels significantly exceed those of just a couple of doses of their vaccine. But they have yet to seek formal authorization from the FDA on booster shots. Also, the FDA and CDC have yet to recommend booster shots for everyone. Lindsay.
Marcus, thank you. Still to come, what you can do to help the people of Haiti. Stay with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, the hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Fog. I've never seen it so thick in my life.
We're still too low level for flight following at this time.
No matter what happens, the storm eventually ends. And when the storm does end, you want to make sure that you're ready.
Kobe Bryant had the best story because he told it himself.
The Black Mamba was a killer.
No fear.
His legacy is this rocky journey ending up in such a great place and stopping.
Superstar Kobe Bryant.
Mambas don't die.
Wednesday on ABC.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Hug you.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Visitors to a Utah zoo jumped into action to save an alligator handler after she was bitten. Dramatic video you see here shows the gator lunge toward the handler, latching onto her hand and then spinning her under the water. A brave zoo goer jumps into the water to help as the handler directs him to jump on the back of the gator so that she can remove her hand. Another zoo goer then pulls her from the enclosure back to safety. The Good Samaritan was finally able to escape as well. The zoo posted a statement on Facebook thanking the Good Samaritans who helped their staffer, and they say the alligator handler is recovering and doing well. Finally tonight, we turn back to the Caribbean and the devastating earthquake in Haiti. So many here at home are wondering just how they can help. ABC's Victor Oquendo reports on the disaster relief teams that stepped up in 2010 who are now back on the ground.
Overnight, disaster response teams from World Central Kitchen and Team Rubicon landing in Haiti with food, water, and relief supplies. Both of these nonprofit organizations born after their founders rushed to Haiti's front lines 11 years ago and witnessed the devastation from the 2010 earthquake firsthand.
The chaos, the uncertainty, there is the literal fog of war that takes place in those moments.
Former Marine Jake Wood traveled to Port-au-Prince with a group of 7 military veterans who offered medical assistance for 3 weeks.
What we found is that as veterans, being able to conduct that operational planning, identify those risks and mitigate them, work within those local populations was a huge benefit to get out to otherwise denied areas.
When he returned to the U.S., Wood created Team Rubicon, a veteran-led disaster response organization with more than 150,000 members.
We're loading out.
2 teams now on the ground in Haiti. After the 2010 earthquake, world's renowned chef Jose Andres has traveled to Haiti more than 20 times with his organization World Central Kitchen, which provides meals in the wake of natural disasters. His team of culinary students in Haiti already hard at work making meals for first responders. Central Kitchen's executive director loading supplies in Miami ahead of the group's arrival in Haiti.
Haiti is in need of a lot right now, both politically and economically and with COVID. But what we're really focused on is food, is providing hot food, fresh meals.
Meanwhile, here in the U.S., Haitian American communities rallying together to support their homeland.
There's a period of shock, of asking, why is this happening again? Then you get into working mode. Okay, what are we going to do?
In Brooklyn's Little Haiti, Haitian Americans are holding meetings to figure out how to get crucial resources to loved ones. And here in Miami, local organizations are combining efforts to send medicine and non-perishables directly to first responders.
We do not want a repeat of 2010, where a lot of international organizations collected millions and millions of dollars, and then the money never really reached the impacted people. This time around, we want to do things differently.
Our thanks to Victor Oquendo for that. And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a good night.